make, we take a little bit more. Does anyone else have
Any comments, not questions?
Yeah.
Just a quick comment, right?
Okay, well, my comment would be that we need to take the politics out of this process. I don't see, I mean, that's been our complaint, and what we've realized we were up against. The governor wanted this gas project, and there was just nothing that we did, could have done, that would have changed that. And if the governor is directing the Department of Public Service and A&R and Historical Preservation, and we, from our experience, know that when you work for the state, you agree with the governor, you're allowed to speak. If you don't, you keep quiet. And that has been not just this governor, but many. So our feeling is there's just no way to make this a fair and just process if there are politics involved. So that's my comment.
I have a comment to make.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, this has to just do with this whole, oh, I'm sorry, yeah, Keith Ballick from Sheffield. Because of it seems like over the last 3 or 4 years, there's been a lot of foot dragging, in particular on the noise issues. And I just wanted to say something. Wednesday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if my former neighbors, the Turians, and I don't know if you know the whole story, they've been forced out of their home. They couldn't live there because of the excessive wind noise. They had to move. They couldn't sell their house, so they're paying taxes on 2 different houses, and they're about to lose the Sheffield home to a tax sale. Because of this whole situation, the inaction on the unresolved noise issue, the kids look a whole lot better, but financially, they're stuck with 2 homes. They had to move just for health reasons. They look much better now, but they were terrible. I mean, I visited them numerous times, and I guess I'm saying if this process needs to go a lot quicker, because there are other people in these situations. Some of them have signed, we call it the gag order, but they have signed on to non-disclosure forms with the wind company. I think there's 6 or 7 people that have done that, residences over in Sheffield. And they've been crying out for like several years, and now they were forced to abandon their home, and now they're about to lose it to a tax auction. And that's going to be Wednesday at the Sheffield Municipal Building. And I'm just saying, and I know there's other unresolved issues over in Georgia Mountain and in other places too. Lowell, Sutton, on the Sutton side of the Sheffield project. I wish we could do something here and maybe have a hearing officer. Not a hearing officer, but like a complaint officer, where it's in confidence between the complainee and the officer, and it's confidential, where if the issues warrant, if the conditions warrant, they go up and do a noise test, but not to telegraph it, because I could tell you in the past, once you telegraph, hey, we're going to go out and do a noise test, what do you think they're going to do? I mean, that's like telling me, that's like me being the guard at the bank and saying, hey, I'm going to go on vacation for a couple of weeks, but I'll be back on the 30th. It's like giving them a warning, and I've seen what they've done. They can disengage the actual blades. They can pivot them, and I've seen this happen over at the Terrians. And the wind's coming from the same direction where they get the worst noise. And hey, how come they're not making noise? Well, they knew the test guy was coming, and even though the wind was coming from the south, they feathered him in another direction to quiet them down. So could we have like a complaint officer where I call them up and I say, I'm really having a problem here, and this is when it's the worst, and let them come up and test it and get the evidence, and then approach the project owner and say, look, this is what we found, not, hey, on such and such a date, we're coming and we're going to be testing this. To me, that's like a warning that they're coming. Reminds me of when I used to work in the factory and they say OSHA's coming in a couple days and then they
Yeah,
they fix
everybody-
everything.
Yeah, we've heard those, yeah.
Yeah.
Good, all right, thank you, good comments.
I
And
hope they could do
yeah,
something
as
like
we-
that.
As we go forward, we'll be taking more public comment and try to summarize and put together recommendations, so thank you. Okay, good. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a comment about the slides.
Go ahead.
It
Slides
has,
is quick.
Steve Whitaker.
Your name?
Steve Whitaker.
Yeah.
It has to do with the issue of standing to be an intervener. I filed a petition successfully, I prevailed 20 years ago. Mysteriously, that docket can't be located at the board now. It set a precedent because it clarified that a regulated utility can't cross-subsidize its unregulated services from its regulated. We're gonna have to dig deeper to find those records.
Have you checked the archives?
I've checked at the board. I have not mined. I've been reluctant to give the department notice because they may go into shredding mode.
You could just call us as opposed to file a public records request. We're
I-
happy to try
Right.
and respond.
Similarly, I asked for the public needs assessment from the department at the hearing on the Comcast docket. And I asked the attorney handling it. I asked him twice after a 2-hour break. And then I asked the director of public advocacy, how come this guy won't produce the record that I called for, that I asked him in person? And it's like, okay, so director of public advocacy says, oh, go ask the commissioner. But on the issue of standing, I actually sued because the telecommunications plan was not done for 10 years. It was required to be done every 3. It was finally done as a hollow shell, but yet we've got pending cases that are supposed to be consistent with it. And then Jim Porter, the director of telecommunications planning, perjured himself on the stand in Superior Court by saying, I don't know whether we did a final draft before we adopted this plan.
So can
Right?
you, are you?
But yet that case was dismissed because I don't have standing. I'm not
So
affected.
what is can you, while we're getting into all of this, it will be helpful to have folks who have recommendations, because obviously you're gonna make a recommendation about standing.
I sent you a dozen recommendations for necessary legislative changes a year ago.
I am asking you for recommendations to this working group.
I will continue to make them
Good.
if you don't try to squeeze me into 2-minute slots.
Well, as I said before, this is our first meeting,
Okay.
and we haven't even talked about how we will be collecting public comments to inform our recommendations. Because we're going to use the public comments to help us
All right,
with
well-
decisions. And so we will have opportunities for written information and spoken information.
Right, well, I think what I'm attempting to do in this preliminary fashion is give you a little history of my depth of experience over 20-something years trying to affect and participate in this process, the impediments and even outright deception going on. I take perjury seriously, and so should you. You're on your
I do.
side.
I also take the accusation of perjury seriously.
The transcripts
So
are
should-
self-evident.
So should you.
The transcript is self-evident. So in any case, I would be happy to lay this out in fuller fashion by invitation at whichever meeting you choose.
And I think another form of laying things out is in writing, because we have to be cognizant of the fact that we may have many people who wish to speak.
Right.
When we hold a public hearing, if we see a lot of people in attendance and we only have a defined amount of time, often we'll suggest that they hand their
Right.
comments to us in writing in addition to.
So we need to set guidelines for our public hearings. Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I think better and integrate thoughts better verbally, and writing, I've done lots of it over the years, and it gets often,
It can be a combination.
thank you.
We will. Okay, so
I think you may have had one more. Sir, did you
Is there
have-
one more?
Yes, if I can make.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, again, my name is Ed Bridka from New Haven, and I've had experience intervening in a Section 248 proceeding, specifically the power plant or the large solar array in New Haven. And one of the things that I'm concerned about the working group is that, your objective here is to increase citizen participation in the PSB process. Well, in this case, a number of people intervened. The town of New Haven intervened and several neighbors intervened, and we submitted a tremendous amount of evidence. We spent thousands of dollars on consultants. We had our own aesthetics expert, and the town of New Haven spent quite a bit of money too. We submitted all of this evidence. And we're very upset that the Department of Public Service ignored it all. As far as we could tell, they didn't read it. They didn't take it at all into consideration. And my point here is that if you're going to encourage people to participate in the process, there's no point in participating if their participation is going to be ignored. And that's basically what happened to us. And when at the hearing, we asked a very simple question. I wanted to ask a very simple question of the person who signed the MOU, a very critical MOU on the part of the department. Did you even read our testimony? And that ignited a firestorm. Mr. Jeff Commons came in and objected and said, no, that violates attorney-client privilege. That violates confidentiality of settlements. The world is going to come to an end if you answer the question. To me, it was a very simple question. Did you read our testimony? Did you take it into consideration? And the department did not even answer that question.
Madam Chair, may I just, I want to support actually what's being said and say some of the changes that we've, so I just want to acknowledge the issue that occurred. The department has implemented a policy now where if there are interveners in a case, we will not enter into an MOU on that, at least on that issue. We might narrow the issues, but we're not going to enter into an MOU unless and until we have conversations with the interveners about what their interests are and decide affirmatively whether to include them or not. So I want to acknowledge that I think our entering into an MOU on that case was premature, and it was a mistake that we won't be repeating. In terms of, I'll always defend my public advocate and my attorneys as, because this is a litigious issue, a process, and it is a legal process. I have to abide, by their determinations of what attorney-client privilege are and not disclose things about our discussions among attorneys and staff. They need to be able to have those conversations. But being the commissioner and not being an attorney, I can say that I think we have an obligation to explain, what we did, what we have reviewed and considered. And, what I will say is, because we're not in that contested case now, we read and review everything that we receive. We may not agree with you, and we may not have had an opportunity or taken the opportunity to figure out how to communicate that with you. But that said, I also think the entrance of the MOU at that earliest stage was inconsistent with my belief of how we should be going forward, and we're not doing that anymore.
So that's the problem that we have too, is with the MOU process, where basically Department of Public Service and the Agency of Natural Resources negotiates with the developer in secrecy. And interveners have no knowledge of these negotiations at all until the MOU is actually executed. And now you're in the unenviable position of trying to unscramble the egg, trying to undo what's been done.
One of the issues, of course, is you want this to be expedient and efficient. So where issues can be agreed to, you kind of want to get them out of the way. But I also understand that this presents a problem for the public, or for public interveners. And in my opinion, unless there are no interveners or there's no issue that interveners have raised, we shouldn't be entering into an MOU before at least the briefings occur, so that everybody understands what the issues are, including the department. We need to be able to see what other people's issues are and decide whether we're settling something that should actually be litigated. There are a lot of things I've discovered in this process that can be improved, and that's why I think we're doing this, but I very much appreciate your points.
I do have some written recommendations that I would like to submit to the working group of these, and also some just technical things about it. When people are intervening, it's good if the rules were more clear to say things like, is two-sided copying permitted? what has to be notarized, what doesn't have to be notarized, how many copies do you submit, do you need to have a cover letter? Just nitty-gritty things like this, which would be helpful if the rules actually set forth those
Yeah,
requirements.
that's a great example of the kinds of things that would help in terms of the practical improvements to ease of citizen participation. And, you know, we've tried to anticipate some of those as Ann described in EPSB as we went through the net metering rulemaking process. But a lot of what we're responding to has not been formally presented to us. So some of it is what we heard. So that kind of thing, I think, is very helpful.
Very helpful. And if you have those now, you can hand them in, or if you may want to add to them as well as we go forward, but we're happy to, we can take those at the end of the meeting.
May I just say one more thing, Madam Chair, because I just want to,
Go ahead.
because we're recording this and and who knows where this is
Right.
going to end up, but I want to clarify that on that particular case, although I said I feel like it was a mistake to enter into the MOU that early, at the time we entered into the MOU, there was not an intervention from New Haven. It occurred at a later stage, where the issues came in at a later stage, if I'm thinking of the same case.
No, the MOU, my recollection, was entered into in late November, and the town and the neighbors intervened in August, I believe.
Okay, I may be thinking of a different case, so we've made more than one mistake. So, but I acknowledge your point, and just want to say that, you know, sometimes, in one case, I remember there was a late intervention that occurred after we had already done this, and that, you know, we ought to figure out a way to address
No, that was not
sort
our
of thing.
case.
That was not this one, okay. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Let's move into the last items on the agenda, which is the scope of review, our next steps, and meeting logistics. And just in terms of meeting logistics, I'm going to start with that one. Seems simple, but I think I'd like to have us have a doodle poll. There's no limitation on our meetings and when we can meet and the number of meetings.
Just a minimum.
Yeah, there's a minimum.
Is there any?
I don't see a minimum either.
No.
No.
It was 3
But we do have to have a report
by
by
February.
February and,
By
Yeah.
December,
by December, and
We
we're done in
cease to
February.
exist
Oh,
in
that's right.
February.
Right.
right, so we can, I don't know what we do between December and February, but,
Right, well, yeah, that's true. Maybe there will be some presentations to various people, but that, preambling the December 15th report will include a lot of work and writing and.
Yeah.
right, so just working backwards from December 15th, if we have something formulated 2 weeks before that as a draft, and so therefore having our work completed.
And we'll want to have the working group approve the draft too.
That's right. That's why I say the draft 2 weeks before,
Right.
then that'll allow for us to have a final draft.
Mhm.
And then, so just going backwards, that means just before Thanksgiving, we should have finalized our sets of recommendations.
And in fairness, because I work with staff all
And
the time.
that's the election time.
Right, and also, well, more than, forgive me, because I know how important election time is, but the Thanksgiving holiday, you know, to make a decision the day before and ask staff to then have something back to you in 2 weeks is a problem. I guess I'd recommend that we back up from the December 15th date and say, okay, we actually want to have a public version out there by November 15th so that we can get comments in and staff can work on it between like November 30th and December, you know, 7th or 8th and get it back to us for final approval. So you really need an earlier draft in November timeframe, I believe.
Okay, so you're
Sorry.
suggesting November 15th.
I'm actually suggesting that we have a pretty much final draft for public review by November 15th, you know. Sorry.
All right, well, let's hold that as a draft. Which means that the bulk of our meetings are September, October, that between between now and Labor Day, how many people are on vacation? I will be.
I will be at the end of this month.
Yeah, so will I.
That's it.
So, but, so, is there any interest in identifying the date for our next meeting?
Yes, and I might say that some of this is informed by what we decide, both in terms of the scope of our review and also what topics we want to cover, and that will help us decide how many meetings we need between now and November 1st.
Right.
Well, I would like to have at least one public hearing
Mhm.
that is substantial.
Yes.
And would allow for people to come in and submit written comment and, as well as speak for a couple of, 2-3 minutes. So if we could, and we have on my list of things to do, and we can add, but it's an Act 174 review and how it came to be. We want to look at the siting and solar siting, the siting commission and the solar siting reports. We can put, will we have a place, will we have a little website that we can go to
Yes,
find
we've already
this?
started a link.
Yes, we can we'll have a webpage that'll be underneath the board, but it'll,
Okay, but it'll be the working group, Act 174 working group?
yes.
And we already posted on there today's agenda, and we will be posting the slides that we presented.
So if you guys don't have them, we're happy to provide electronic versions of the Energy Generation Siting Commission report as well as the Solar Siting Task Force report.
It sounds like that we should get maybe electronic copies of those, including also, I think someone suggested the APA,
Yep.
Administrative Procedures Act. so
Right,
that we
and
can-
here's what I was thinking about the APA.
Yeah.
Aaron Adler would be the person who could speak to Act 174.
Mhm.
He could also speak to APA because he's the LCAR.
That's true, but it might be better to have a board
Well, we need a
lawyer,
board person to talk about.
because they would be better able to talk about it in terms of our processes.
Right,
As
for
opposed to-
APA.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
as opposed to like generically, I think it might help to narrow that.
Okay.
And I think it also would help to have us all as members read for background, I think this doesn't apply to what you just said, but read for background, not necessarily have a presentation, but definitely read for background, Act 174, the Siting Commission report, the Solar Siting Task Force report.
Right. And do we need any more on quasi-judicial versus judicial procedures related to the courts? Probably not at this point. We did want to hear about how the Natural Resources Board bifurcates its process.
With respect to enforcement. and
That
doing
is
over-
enforcement.
That's a different issue. Or is
Yeah,
that
it's
the
a
same
totally
issue?
different issue,
Okay.
but.
Yeah.
But there will be, I know that the E-Court has,
Well, what we.
we'll sort that out, but I think the E-Court process for public engagement is, may be useful to hear about.
I think the issue of enforcement almost stands by itself, because I'm not sure that there's necessarily a model to follow. It might be better to look at what's needed and what currently exists, and that will help point out some of the flaws or the holes.
Can you do that? Can we have a presentation about enforcement? Good.
It won't be very long.
Yeah,
that's good.
and we can help with that if
Can you?
it's appropriate, because there
Yeah,
has
because
been
it's
a
more,
separate.
I think they're different, it's more getting at different, what is enforcement?
Exactly.
What are the
Yeah.
mechanisms for
Right.
enforcement?
Right.
And I think that it raises the question of what's needed, not only in terms of investigation, but also timeliness.
Yeah, I
Right.
agree.
Okay. And then, the other issue is Department of Public Service process.
Right.
And how you work with folks.
And
with the
they'd be
public.
very different. Their department would have a totally different presentation about this than we would.
We
Right.
would, absolutely.
So, but as it relates to the Public Service Board.
Yes.
And what changes you're making,
Uh-huh.
if any?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Are you taking notes? I am, but we should compare, we can have to compare.
so I will structure the next agenda with Ann, I guess you're the, good. So we'll be talking about, and if you have ideas about what you would like to hear first, let me know.
Yeah. So just to give you a sense of what these poor people deal with, I've just got notice that they issued 25 orders today, the board. 25.
And we go through all of them with a fund.
Can you talk a little bit about time and staffing at some point?
Could I just make one observation? The Supreme Court routinely issues 2 or 3 in a week. We have a.
And then take time, I mean, U.S. Supreme Court, Chris, takes the summer off.
But we have a huge volume of workload that we produce on a weekly and a daily basis.
Yeah.
Should I add that as an agenda item for the future?
I can't hear you.
Should I add that as an agenda item? I'm taking.
Well, workload,
Yeah.
because that does.
Yeah, and I started to touch on
Okay.
it with the slide that talked about increasing numbers and the change in types.
Yes.
And so if, do you want more on amount of time? What is it exactly? What do you envision
I'm not
in
sure it's the
workload?
amount of time
Yeah.
as much as it is the type of decisions that you're making now as compared with perhaps
So
what
drill
was
down a
happening
little more on that slide.
and how that might influence people's participation and their
Mhm.
perception of participation.
So more detail, basically.
Yes, more detail.
And I think, Madam Chair, we got the same issue, again, a parallel issue with the department. We participate in every single one of these. And I think we used to be more helpful to people than we probably are, and it's probably mostly a workload issue.
Okay. And so the diversity of cases is something we should know about, sort of categorizing those different types. Okay. All right, so I think we sort of have a bead on the information we want. Tony, you brought up your comment about the difference between a CPG and a permit.
Yeah.
Is there something that we can add on to the agenda that would help us get at issues around that? Expectations? Think about it. So our scope of review, I guess we're talking about, but our charge is to promote increased ease of citizen participation in the proceedings, PSB. So the ease of participation, and we've heard today that there's some changes being made that seem to be satisfying some of the concerns that we're also hearing about. And we won't know everything until we learn what we don't know. So, we will do a doodle poll for meetings. I'm gonna suggest that we hold ourselves to try to think about 2 meetings a month, and perhaps more. So see what we can fit in. And,
what about place?
well, how's this? Does this fit with your?
This seems to work okay for the
Schedule?
number of people. If we find, a hearing perhaps should be.
We'd have to make sure, of course, there wasn't a hearing taking place, but.
Right. So that's why we have Ann. It's good.
Unless it was easier access for folks to do it at the State House.
Yeah.
I mean, we could reserve room 11. When we have a public hearing, I think
Yeah, you probably would.
we'll definitely reserve
Yes,
room
definitely
11.
for a public hearing, it should be bigger than this.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what to do about the parking issue that Annette Smith raised. That's a Montpelier City problem that
If I
affects
may,
us.
the car lot is now a public lot,
Mhm.
and it's quite large. So,
It is?
comparatively
With the dirt
to.
lot.
No, is it, is public now?
Yeah,
And not for pay, or
that's correct. It's open to the public.
when did that happen?
Just last month at the beginning of.
So after you
July.
guys left.
Shocking.
Wow, that's
It's-
good.
It's,
That's
when you're
news.
coming into town,
Yeah.
after you come over the bridge, there's a lot to the left.
Yeah.
And it's a dirt
Well,
lot.
as you
and-
come over the bridge.
Bridge
It's
is to the
behind the
right.
Capitol Plaza next to the
Thank
river.
you.
Right.
You know, it's right, so it's not paved, that's how you know it's there. But it's right next to the river.
And eventually there'll be construction there, I think, in November or thereabouts, but right now it's open to the
Oh,
public.
it's right by our electric car.
Yeah, also parking is a little more relaxed with, during the summer than it is,
Yeah,
and in the fall than it will be in January.
so,
In January, somebody can have my parking space.
there you go.
Mine too.
I hope, anyway, so we will, we'll doodle you,
Okay.
figure out. I'm, you know, I hesitate to suggest that we meet, if you're going on vacation. I'm going
Well,
on vacation. I can't meet,
I can do, so I can't do the last 2 weeks of August, but I could do the first week of September.
Is anyone?
okay,
I can do the first week
Okay,
of September,
never mind.
but not the second.
okay, let's look at the first week of September together,
Do we-
which would be, is this a good day? Is today Thursday or Friday?
Today is Friday.
And I have Elcar on Thursday, so,
And we always have board meetings on Wednesdays, I'm never available on a Wednesday.
so Wednesday's out,
That leaves Mondays and Tuesdays.
at least Friday. I have a meeting.
Well, is El Cargo all day, or you don't want to do both in
Well,
one
no,
day
I
as
can
long
do
as you're
both
here?
in one day, and I'm happy to do that,
I mean, if it
actually.
saves you.
Saves
That would
me a
save
lot.
your trip.
That's
So
what it is.
we meet from 10 to 12, so I could meet beginning at 12:30.
Okay.
Mhm.
And we could meet from 12:30 until,
On Thursdays?
on Thursdays, every other Thursday. So, I don't have my Elcar schedule with me, I have to figure it out.
Did you meet yesterday?
No, we're meeting next week.
Okay.
So we're meeting on the 11th, the 25th.
Do we have stuff on the road? Yeah,
This is mine.
okay. Do you know whether we have any kind of oral argument or?
The 8th.
Let me pull up the calendar. Or do you
So
have-
the 8th is good.
What's the 8th?
That's the
I thought that was
Thursday.
the 11th.
Oh, you're September.
not gonna do it.
September.
I'm looking at September.
Oh.
Margaret, I know
So-
you're
That's the
full
first
of
week.
We're not gonna do
No,
another one in
it's the
August?
second week. Yeah.
Why not another one
7
in
days in a
August?
week.
First, 2 days. Huh?
We don't wanna do another one in August?
I would.
I would.
You're welcome to, I will not be able to do it, unless you do it I can do it the week of the 15th, the week of the 22nd, I cannot.
Why don't we?
We could do it on the
So should we do
18th,
the doodle poll?
in the
Yeah,
afternoon.
But also, why don't we, also, if we're gonna have multiple meetings, then, you know, if we can get a quorum.
Yeah, you're
we
fine,
should go
yeah.
ahead with it.
Yeah. I'm fine with that. Doing it up.
Okay, so the choice
Jeff or
is,
someone will be here to, like, keep
the
it all.
choice is to have a meeting on August 18th.
I believe we have an oral argument.
It's been rescheduled for the 7th.
Oh, okay.
of
So the
September.
18th works.
I believe so.
Or we could meet on the 8th without Tony. If we meet on the 18th, we might be meeting on the 8th anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's pencil in the 18th at 12 o'clock.
August?
Yes.
Yes.
And we'll meet here. And then that'll give Ann time to send out a doodle poll for the
True.
next meetings, and we'll try to do it. I would prefer if we could coordinate when I have my Elkhart meetings, and I'll make sure you get those dates. And then that'll be the Thursday, and it'll be the afternoon, 12:30. That'd be great.
On the 18th, are you starting at noon, or did you want to start at
Noon.
12:30?
Well,
Oh,
the
what did you
11th,
say?
the 11th is actually when I have my Elkhart. So the 18th could start at 10 o'clock.
10,
I'm doing
Yeah.
this a little bit blind too.
So
We'll
is
do a
this-
doodle then.
Yeah.
Let's do a doodle anyway, and
And
if
do you
the
think-
18th looks like it's problematic, we'll
I'm just
change it.
wondering about the morning, but I'll let you know.
Let's just do the doodle poll, because I don't wanna confuse people who are here,
Right,
who are
Right.
gonna get the wrong impression and then
Right.
say, oh, you didn't let us know. So
Let's
we'll-
do that, and
do
then
that.
we'll post it as soon as we know on the website.
Right, and it'll be on the website.
Okay.
Okay.
So, are we generally looking at like 3-hour meetings? Is that what
Yes.
you're?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
I think
That's
3
all.
hours is sufficient.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
And, so we'll do our reading. I'll talk with Ann about, getting an agenda set up, and let me know what you would like to have on the agenda. It's not rocket science.
I think one of the key questions, at what point would the public hearing be most useful? Anyway, just something to think about, early on, after we've had a couple of presentations, at what point, something to think about.
So I'm thinking early October might be useful.
Yes.
And people aren't around
When
so
they're
much in
available,
August
then.
either.
No, nobody's around in August.
Right.
No. That's why we have primaries. in
That's why
August.
we have primaries. So we'll target sometime in October, and then the next question about the public hearing, which we don't have to resolve today, is
Mhm.
daytime hearing, evening hearing. And because people might be more available
That's true.
between 5 and 7
Mhm.
than they are in the middle of the
Yeah,
day.
particularly if our meetings are all held during the day.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
people can still
Yeah,
pass the
so
days.
I would actually recommend that we do
Mhm.
a public hearing in the
Mhm.
evening.
But just, I wasn't sure if this was one of the topics that you had on your list, Senator, but it was one we discussed. Kind of, I would call it intervenor assistance as a topic, and that would be,
Okay?
it covers technical, procedural, and financial.
And that, so that,
Do you have
we
that?
sort of have that on, but, what are the rules that guide that?
Yeah, and how
And-
can we make it, how can we
And what-
facilitate?
What's going on with the Public Service Board, and I would also like to include in that how you deal with
Mhm.
folks who are interested in.
Right, right.
Okay.
But I think it covers all three of those pieces, the technical, the procedural, and financial.
We should do that pretty upfront, pretty quick.
So I've heard three areas for a board presentation, which in each case may or may not include something that the department
Parallel.
parallels. And I've heard just now rules for intervention and ease of intervention, enforcement as an issue, and types of cases, drilling down on one of the slides that I presented. So
On which? the
types of cases.
Types of cases, yeah.
Which I did an overview of on one of the slides. And so if we can get some notice time to make those presentations as soon as you know what the agenda or draft agenda will be, that would be helpful.
I think it would be nice to get them fairly soon. We might
Mhm.
split those up. We don't need them all at once.
Right.
So the rules, the board rules will be also out on our little website or linked to.
A link to it, yes.
Yeah, so we use, and same with our rules.
What do you mean by board rules?
Well, you have rules and procedures that are,
Oh, I see.
No, but I think what we could do to make this very easy for the committee is just have a link on your page so that people who
Right.
are interested in this process can go to that.
right.
Okay.
And then, because not all of those rules or procedures relate to our charge.
The
So
reason I
at
ask is
some
because
point-
rules has a broader meaning in our world.
Oh,
Like the rules for interconnection or
Right.
oh,
rules for net metering. or the
Right.
rule-
Yeah.
So that's why I asked what kind of rules
It
are.
sounds like more like you're saying rules of procedure.
rules of procedure, I think, or
Right.
procedures for citizen participation.
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. Anything else? This all seems very big right now.
Yep. It is.
Senator Lyons, can I ask you a quick question? Are all of you folks' business emails readily available on the State of Vermont website?
Yes, for me.
Well, mine, I only have my legislative, the email on the website for me that's non-legislative, it no longer exists. Use my legislative email.
Thank you.
So it brings up an interesting question, which I have for our general counsel, either a general counsel or a public advocate, but I think Jeff's gonna defer you. If people send us stuff by email, or we are doing anything other than coordinating logistics by email, is that a public meeting issue for us?
Not for this group.
Not
This
for
is a
this group.
legislative
This is
working group. This is
okay.
not
Just
not
checking.
that kind of group. But I would suggest that if you do have communications that you'd like to, or submittals that you would like to put forward, that they should happen at the public hearing. And I can't imagine, honestly, that we would be able to respond to every single email that we get if all the public started to
I will
bombard
not.
us. So what
Now.
we do in other cases is to have those emails that come to us go to a central location. So it would, I don't know whether it's Ann or who it's gonna go to, and then those are collected as part of the public comment. And so that's really the way it should be. And then that includes agenda suggestions, so everything. And you can copy us, that's fine, but I think,
So what address should that be? Clerk or?
we haven't resolved that yet, so who would that be? Who is that? I don't see this as something that should happen on a regular basis. If you have something important that you need to share, and that you think is important, you need to speak to an agenda item, that's a time when you would communicate with the clerk, the administrative assistant, the economist in this case.
Yes, and our chief
So,
economist.
she's got, this is like, think of this as a legislative committee, and the process there is, I want to testify, and then the question is it appropriate to testify for the specific topic, or would that be more relevant for a public hearing? So, allowing for that kind of process.
The only one I think that I haven't heard you mention, and I know other people that may have, is the use of technology beyond EPSB. The dissolution of interactive television, which the board and the department used extensively, created a void. And I think you may want to have a working session around
Thank
technology.
you, thank you, because someone else mentioned that to me, and I think that's a really good point.
It's such a good point, because we've had a couple of very important statewide issues where in the past we used Vermont Interactive Television,
Could have
where
helped a
people
lot.
could participate no matter where they were in the state, and simultaneously. And since its demise, we've been forced to hold hearings in, for many people, very inconvenient places. So I'm glad you raised that, and it's something for the legislature to think about.
Well, let's put that into the hopper for this committee, because
how
that
people
is
have
ease
access.
of
Access.
citizen participation
Yeah.
in PSB proceedings.
Mhm.
It's a huge issue.
It is. Now, it definitely has gotten less easy. And may I move to another question? And that is minutes. We've had Andrea taking minutes today,
Right.
anticipating that the group would want minutes. There are various ways to do minutes, at least in the world of these kinds of proceedings. When the citing commission met, they actually had a court reporter doing the public transcript of every meeting. In between there, the working group at their discretion can have minutes. Some, in my experience, have had minutes taken, some have not, and just instead posted agendas. And so we thought we would ask you at the end if you want to continue in this way and then post the minutes, or if you have something else that you would prefer.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because we don't traditionally have minutes
Mhm.
for meetings. We do have an agenda, and we have the folks who
Right.
have presented, and we collect the written testimony. So anyone who's presenting would provide something in writing, then that is available, that represents the meeting proceedings.
And in the House, we're all on the record, recorded. so-
Yeah, so we're
Not
also,
so in the Senate.
are we, we're recording.
You're recorded now?
Always, every committee I'm on. Do you, are we recording ourselves today?
No, but Andrea, we did have the cameras recording us, but this is
That's-
for
That's
community
public,
access.
community-
Right.
community
We are
purposes.
not recording ourselves.
Okay.
And however, there are people in the room doing so, but that's at their discretion.
I
We
think,
do have these minutes being taken.
I think we should record our meetings, and that takes the burden off of Andrea. And then I think the best use of Andrea's time is to identify questions that we have for future meetings, for information, and for our initial recommendations, like today. We brought up VIT. Thank you very much.
So then I would suggest that
That goes down.
perhaps instead of treating these as traditional minutes, which she writes up later and then we post, that she go through and pull out the suggestions, and so that we can have them later to,
To help
As
inform our
potential-
report.
Potential
Exactly.
action items.
It's really,
Yeah.
really, that's our goal, is the report.
right,
And,
that would be, I think that would be very helpful.
yeah, I do too.
Do we in this room have the capacity to use the microphones and stuff to, and table mics or something to record, just generally record these proceedings?
I don't know, I'll have to look into that.
Okay.
We'll figure something out.
Okay.
We will find a way to do this.
There you go.
That's
Wow.
why we love it.
Yes. good job.
That's the kind of
Or
person.
we did it at the State House.
Yeah, I
They
know.
do that.
If we went up to the State House, we could.
Oh,
I
that
got-
would be, that's an interesting point.
Yeah.
It's
That's
automatically
true.
done in the state house.
Automatic.
Okay.
Automatic.
And
we-
they have the
And
technology
we
in
can
words.
get them to help staff it, so.
It's a terrific idea.
But
There are many meetings going on in that building on a daily basis, so finding a room. Once we know when our meetings are, we can sort of figure out whether we can do some up there.
Well, it certainly would be good. I think that's a great idea. It would
Yeah.
help with our limited resources since we aren't set up for that.
Yeah, okay. Maybe a little borrow. All right. So have we've done everything, I think.
Mhm.
We haven't set the next agenda, but we're.
So point of contact is Ann Bishop, basically?
Can we hold off on that? We will definitely have a point of contact.
Right.
for you. We will-
I think it'll be up on the website.
Yeah,
Right.
I was thinking the website should be the initial point of contact. The
Right.
website, I'm envisioning, as it does now, had our agenda for today, time and place, et cetera. Ideally, perhaps then, and links like to today's presentation. But then what we'll need is some entry point for
Right.
Queries, which whether it's by email or,
Mhm.
and by whom, we still have to figure out. But we
And-
should put that up as soon as we figure
And
it
as
out.
Aaron said, we'll make that happen.
Right.
And you'll know who to contact. We just don't know who yet.
Mm.
Good. Yeah, so figuring out logistics is fun. Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Would you like a motion to adjourn?
Well, you know what? And so, sure, when I can also say we're adjourned.
You could also just do that. if
I
you
could
want.
do that.
You could just do that.
That's the legislative tradition.
I'm
so
great with that.
I think we are, and I just want to say thank you. This is we're in initial stages, and we'll try to pull this all together. Do some good work.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Great.
thanks.
Thank